Hi, and welcome to At the Sharp End, a weekly business show where we discuss business topics, a wide range of business topics that we've come across when we've been talking to our clients and prospective clients. Khemeia is an innovation agency, and so we deal with taking things from concept through development right through to market and marketing them. We work with partners to do that. And today on the show I've got Jon Stephenson, who's our Head of Market Insights at Khemeia. Welcome, Jon.
Good morning, Ian. Thank you for inviting me on At the Sharp End.
You're very welcome. So hoping to have a discussion about getting started with innovation and talking about some of the companies that are great innovators and why they're great innovators. So I think that's really good perspective for some of our clients who may be, or some of the people out there that are thinking about innovating but wondering just exactly how they get started.
Okay.
So the first thing is probably to talk about a little bit about how do companies get started, and I think it's an Einstein quote that says, you know, a problem can't be solved by thinking about it in the same way. So what he's really saying there is you've got to step outside your experience, you've got to seek external help, and you've got to come at things from a different perspective. And I think that's a great place to start, because that's one of the things that creative people do all the time, right?
Absolutely. The main driver for me in terms of innovation is the ability to do what we're doing at the moment, which is have an open debate, ability to ask questions, explore challenges and opportunities. Now, the only way you can do that is by asking questions, but in an open forum. And the difficulty with open forums and open questions sometimes is you can pose a question, but if you pose a question, a lot of people run in too quick and make assertions, and I think that's a dangerous thing. So what you've got to have is an open mind and not a closed mindset. Some of the clients that we've worked with at Khemeia Consulting think they already know the solution to the problem before they've actually put the magnifying glass or their specs on and looked into the problem properly to identify if there is enough customers out there from a business insights perspective to actually get that product into market or get that service into market. But before you get to that, I do think it's really important that sometimes when we go in, we've got to put forward to a business that don't rush in too quick. Try to find the answers just like that. It doesn't happen, it takes time.
Well, it's really interesting you say that. So a lot of companies try to design an outcome rather than specify what the problem is, and that can increase the levels of failure and risk of not being able to enact what you're trying to do. A classic example of that are typically public sector service contracts. So and it's driven for all the right reasons. They're looking for outputs, and they have to justify everything that they're spending, and that's perfectly right, but it puts a massive constraint on how something can be delivered. And so what they're trying to do is, when they do a tender, they're trying to design an outcome. And you will have seen this maybe on business support programs that we've tended into, where you know, some of the outputs are about how many jobs have been created for the amount of money that's been spent. And not forgetting, this is taxpayers' money that we're talking about here, so it's absolutely right that that should be measured, and that the outcomes should be have some targets attached to them. But there should also be some learning around, can you risk some of that money and get a better outcome than the outcome that you're designing? And in fact, can you learn from the program? Is it just the same old program that's been run before, or is it a new program? Can you do something a bit more, dare I say, innovative?
Yes, there you go. I think that's absolutely spot on. So a lot of the public tenders and the various projects up and down the UK arguably fall down, and they fall down on one thing, which is focus. What do I mean by focus? Well, from the start and in the remit and in the objectives and the program of support that they're actually expecting from possibly a supporting business to come in and supply the solution to the problem or need they've identified is, have they actually asked the right questions in the first place? And if they have, did they really understand and unravel what they found before they wrote the brief?
So there aren't many authorities out there that are doing this yet, but there's a programme running in York through York Council and through Science City York, which is a partner organisation. And what they're doing for the people who live in and around York is they've got a collaboration platform. And the first part of that is asking people if they'll collaborate. And asking the people also, which seems pretty brave for a council, to identify the problems that are perceived by the citizens of York.
Agreed.
So, I mean, that's a fantastic step forward to be so open and invite comment, because I think most councils will be scared of that. But they've done it, and they've developed this platform with Science City York called Genius York. It's really successful. They've done a couple of rounds of asking the citizens what their perceptions of the key problems facing the council are in York, and then they've given the citizens a right of reply as well, and asked them to collaborate. And so last month they ran an event, actually might be earlier this month, they ran an event where they invited members of the public to come and work in an open collaborative fashion with Science City York, with members of the council, to design the solutions that will impact the whole authority. So it enables the authority to do more with less money, which is critical at our time. At this time, all the budgets have been slashed, as you probably know. So they've got to move to a more innovative way of doing things. And
I think that's...
it shows a certain maturity, I think, within that authority.
Yeah, what's exciting about that, Ian, sorry for jumping in when you were in the sentence there, is how refreshing is that as a story? It's brilliant, because what they've done is they've shaken the shackles off of the old way of thinking, and they're beginning to explore different ways of thinking by asking new question sets, which opens them up to public debate, but importantly, in terms of social inclusion, gets everyone in the community involved who've actually got a voice, and it's a proper two-way interaction with the people that elected them in the first place. And in my opinion, it's a reflection on what needs to happen more up and down the country. Well, what do I mean by that? Well, the solutions and the projects that they're putting forward are community-based, so they're based on what the residents want. They're based on data that the council's got, and they're based on making the best of technology, or using technology in a proactive way to help the local community and save money whilst doing it. Absolutely fantastic.
And isn't it interesting as well that, you know, York Council has been so open about that, but national government have done precious little to have the same sort of conversations at a national level. So, you know, the nod that is in the right direction is possibly the e-petitions platform, which people might not know about, but it, again, is in the link or in our show notes on our website. And e-petitions allows any member of the public with a beef to go and highlight the problem that they think, and then promote that problem. And if they get enough people backing it and voting for it, it will get debated in the House of Commons. And that's that's a great starting point. But it really doesn't break down that conversation to say, well, what do you perceive that the problems are, and can you engage to help fix them? Because I think a surprising number of people would be interested to engage to fix them.
Yeah, I agree, and you've hit on a really important point there, which I was hoping you were going to touch upon actually, so we could talk about it, which is the problem with innovation management, and what I perceive to be the biggest problem with innovation management, or a scheme such as that, in that how the devil do you turn ideas from activity into implementation? It's very easy to have a debating shop and discuss a hot topic, but often I've found working at Khemeia, being an innovation agency, is that people can have these wonderful ideas, but often what I perceive to be the missing link is implementation. And that implementation link with innovation could be something that a SME struggles with, it could be something that a council in this instance struggles with, or a larger business. But ultimately, what I think is exciting about York Council and what they've done is that they're trying to imbue the right culture, systems and processes externally and invite people in. And that's a complete game changer.
Well, it is, and there are some great companies around that have been doing that for a number of years now, harnessing the power of online activity, social media, co-creation platforms, which we've come across in the past, to really influence where their company goes and what they develop. So some of the big ones that are well known for this kind of thing are Lego, who've got a fantastic co-creation platform. And that's completely changed the outlook of Lego, which is one of the internationally is children's favourite toys. On the other end of the spectrum, Procter and Gamble, which is effectively a chemicals company. They might not like me saying that, but actually that's what they do, right? So they make household cleaning equipment, they make creams, potions, lotions, pills, etc., etc., etc. And they've been using open collaboration and co-creation as a way of identifying new market niches. And I think the thing that this proves and shows beyond any shadow of a doubt is that no single person is smart enough to recognize all those opportunities. And we can study them, we can look at the data, but actually those different contexts and different perspectives that people bring to the conversation really helps that creative process and really helps a company to define what it is, where the need is, and actually develop innovative products that make money. At the end of the day, that's the goal, right?
I agree, and you've hit a really important point again there, that from a company's perspective and an end user's perspective, or from a resident's perspective at a council, how the devil do you make value from innovation? And that's the hardest part. It really is. And what excites me about what P&G have done and what York Council are doing is that they've realised, and one of the strengths of the platform, I think, is that it isn't an innovation until the end customer, in P&G's case, or resident in York Council's case, is actually engaged and using that service in York Council's way, or using that product. That's innovation to me. It's making value from innovation.
No, that's absolutely right. So when we look at innovation from a product perspective or a business perspective, there's a big thing there about you have an idea, you want to develop something. What we're talking about with collaboration and co-creation is you actually start to test that idea very, very early, and rather than develop and try and get to an end point that you think is the right project, you're actually starting and being deflected and actually finding a better path to get into that successful product. And that's really, I think, the value of crowdsourcing, which is actually there's a really good book on crowdsourcing and co-creation, and we'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. But that open online activity, we're seeing more and more of it now as companies look for crowdfunding as well. So they'll often shoot a video about their idea, they'll talk about the market, the perception, the positioning, etc., and use that to generate and raise awareness and actually fund the development. It's not possible for all businesses, but it is if you are quite retail focused or quite consumer focused. I think business-to-business sales struggle a little bit more in doing that kind of thing. But still, it shows that going out there and having conversations with people really strengthen your proposition. And if we look at some of the great innovators, you start to realise that actually innovation isn't hard, and it's not just about the idea. In fact, most really successful and innovative CEOs have an ideas book, and they'll write down ideas that they might want to work on, but they filter them, and they're looking for the timing, they're looking for the opportunity. But the fact that they've written them down means that they're present in their mind, and they can go back to them and write more notes about them. And that's actually a valuable way of filtering and developing the innovation, rather than thinking, well, I've got the next world-beating idea and I'm just going to develop that. You know, that's quite a high-risk approach.
So do you think, developing on that line of thought, that someone who jots down a leading CEO in a book, the essence of their idea, the next trick then to get implementation and to start moving it forward is to distill that idea to make sure it's simple, relevant, and understandable in the first instance, to get the conversation going.
Yeah, but to your point, having an idea in the first place is only the first step. How you enact that is the next bit. And unless your business is very simple and straightforward, it's phenomenally difficult. If you've got a vision of how you want to do something, it's phenomenally difficult for someone else to come and steal that. And in fact, it only usually happens right at the end when it's a big success and it's worth stealing. You know, a lot of the time, early stage innovation is so hard and so costly that, and I'm really talking about products now rather than services or business process or business model, but product development is hugely expensive. So if you can break down the problems and iterate towards that solution, reduce the risk, get more people enthused about it, you've got a fantastic opportunity, which is typically called the market first mover opportunity, to, you know, tie down the supply chain, to tie down the route to market and make that happen very slickly. And in fact, we're all very familiar with a company that does exactly that, and that's Apple.
Yeah.
So Apple look at a lot of research, they look at a lot of up-and-coming technologies, and they'll go in and they'll buy up their supply chain for that technology. So there's a bizarre position where they've bought screens for certain phones and their iPads and things like that, made by a manufacturer, where the manufacturer can't use it in its own devices for a period of time because Apple's bought all the supply of it and tied it down. So they've got an exclusivity. Now that's big business stuff, but you know, that doesn't actually stop anybody operating like that. If you've got that route to market, if you can find that supply chain niche, then you can go and do the same kind of thing if you've got the right volume and the right market.
Yeah, I agree. It's customer discovery and customer validation, and there isn't anything stopping any business, be it from a micro business to a larger scale business, actually having the inherent understanding of going out there and getting out of the building and talking to potential customers who may be using their product.
You're right. You're absolutely right. And I think the only thing that does stop people is maybe fear of their innovation being stolen before they've really innovated.
Yeah.
And fear of, I guess, fear of rejection as well to a certain extent. So there's a big thing about when someone invents something, that invention to them is, you know, it's something that they're really passionate about, and if they go to the market and the market says this is not, you know, this is useless, we're not paying any more for this, or we're not paying that amount of money for it, it needs to be a tenth of the price, but you can't make it for that, they've effectively just said that's a rubbish idea, or that idea is not effective, there needs to be a better way of enacting that idea. But for an inventor, that's a difficult pill to swallow. Yeah. For a company that is naturally innovative, actually that's a piece of learning, because you've got a load of information about what price it needs to be, what sort of volume you might be able to sell about that product. So is there a better way of doing it? And if you've got the resources, you go back around the loop and you'd iterate.
Yeah. Are we touching upon business modelling there a bit, Ian? I wonder if we should maybe talk a little bit about business modelling and the importance of it, because what you're talking about there is about the business logic. You're talking about how the business intends to make money from the product or from the service.
It is, but I think also it comes down to the willingness of the innovator or entrepreneur to get behind the idea and find the route to market, find the solution. And you're absolutely right. There's a big part of business modelling in that. But if we look at one of the most recent big name innovators in the UK, James Dyson, his route, his path from concept to market was very long, very expensive, and very labour intensive. So he did a ridiculous number of prototypes.
Yeah.
And to the sort of man in the street, that seems like a ridiculous way to go. But actually, what he's doing is he's addressing risk. He's carving out a very good market niche. He was trying lots of different little things to say, can I protect that? Is that patentable? Can I make that work? This is a new idea. And so it wasn't just a bagless vacuum cleaner that most people sort of think about when you think about a Dyson, but it was how the motors are driven, it was how the plastics are made, it was how the cyclone technology for the air movement works. It was, could you have a bagless vacuum cleaner? Could the filters be made better and replaceable? And a multitude of other things, I've got to say as well. So getting to that point, he's actually starting to think logically about not just one problem for that product, but lots and lots of products, and how he gets there and how he builds his market position. And he went from zero to building, the UK's one of the UK's best branded vacuum cleaner companies. Although I think they call themselves an air management company rather than a vacuum cleaner company, because they do other sorts of air products as well. So they're a massive success, and now lots of graduates aspire to work there because they are so successful.
Yeah, I think what's really... Sorry, go on.
No, carry on.
I was just going to jump in and say one of the refreshing things about that approach was that a lot of reasons are possible reasons why companies fail and fall over is that they don't build a shared understanding, and they don't go out there and understand what the tough challenges are. Now, you mentioned about pivots and iterations with Dyson. I think I'm right in thinking that it involved a couple of hundred pivots and changes internally to the actual product itself. So he wasn't afraid to look at a Hoover, challenge the traditional assumptions, and then learn from that so it could innovate successfully. That takes drive, and it takes time to do that.
And what was the frustration, right? He's looking at a market that's a very well established market. I think every household had a Hoover, or sorry, that's incorrect, isn't it? Had a vacuum cleaner of some description, maybe even more than one, because you get people with industrial vacuum cleaners for sucking up spills and building rubble and all that sort of stuff, as well as their main carpet cleaner. And he looked at that whole industry and went, but that's just not good. That's just not been innovated for so many years. There must be a better way. And then sitting back and saying, well, I think there is a better way. This is how I might do it, and starting to build those prototypes. And it's the sort of classic. It's really interesting because it's a classic sort of inventor in his shed kind of story, which appeals to people. He's done very well out of that. But actually, he's taken a way of working that larger businesses often use to get their products to market as well. Build it, iterate it, test it, rethink it, and just keep going around that cycle. And very much like our head of marketing, Haroon Rashid's approach to online marketing, if you're not testing, measuring, and adapting, you're not getting the best out of your marketing. It's the same kind of thing. It's an iterative process. And if you want to get the value out of any innovations that you do, you've got to do that.
Yeah, and it's all about building, what's the word I'm looking for, momentum behind the innovation. And one of the things that Haroon's successful at doing is building a shared understanding. which is simple, relevant, and understandable with his clients.
Absolutely right. So you talked about business model innovation because I think you thought that's where I was going to start with.
Yeah.
There is a huge element to business model innovation in a lot of things, and you know, a great one. We're both cycling fans,
Yeah.
so we make no apologies for that. We are both cycling fans. We've just enjoyed a fantastic Tour de France and absolutely superb that it came to Yorkshire. So well done, welcome to Yorkshire. Well done, Gary Verity. You should be knighted. Absolutely fantastic achievement. What I really want to talk about, though, is the business model behind Chris Boardman taking his bikes to market. So Chris Boardman was formerly the UK's most successful cyclist, arguably. So he held a lot of records. He held Olympic medals. He held the maximum distance an hour record for a while, and just phenomenally successful. And Chris is now retired and he's commentating, so we can see him on ITV4 quite often, commentating on cycling events, and a great guy. So he's always interested in cycling. As a lot of old pros do, he decided to bring a bike to market, or a bike range to market. So he found a manufacturer that he could work with. He helped in the design of the frames, the selection of componentry, and he started to try to break down the barriers for people getting into cycling and bring some of the innovations that have been used in the racing scene down the sort of market chain. The only problem was he couldn't find a route to market. He really struggled to get the bike chains to take his brand seriously, and that's often the case in business. You know, you've got to find a different way of doing things. And Chris's way was he went out and he talked to a lot of people, and he really struggled to find a route to market. But as we probably all know, his bikes are sold in Halfords, not typically a company you would expect to sell high-end bikes. They were more known for entry-level bikes and kids' bikes and things like that, but actually taking on the Boardman brand really pushed that forward. And I think, you know, we've got a few friends, haven't we, John, who ride Boardman bikes and are very impressed with them.
We have. The key thing I thought with Boardman bikes, and the clever thing with Boardman bikes, was that if you look at a business model, there are four areas of business model: customers, offer, infrastructure, and financial viability. Now, Chris had the offer right, and he understood the customers, because when you've ridden bikes, as he has, and been phenomenally successful, you know what a good bike is, you know what the frame needs to be, you know what the components are like. You might have some problems sourcing materials, possibly, in the internal infrastructure to get the right components to fit the bike, etc. But as Ian's touched upon, it's the financial viability to make that idea come to fruition. So, for instance, the missing link for Chris was that he understood the customers who he wanted to make a bike for. The novice cyclist at first, when he first launched. He understood the offer in terms of what it needed to get people excited about the bikes, and as Ian and I just said, they are nice bikes. There's no two ways about that. But what he was lacking was the infrastructure, and a business model is all about building blocks, and the key building block that Chris didn't have before he put a key partnership together to outsource partners was Halfords. And in one strike, he was able to get the distribution channel right. And what he was able to do there, effectively, was get the communication, the sales channel, and the distribution way of shipping his bikes done and in the public eye.
Well, and in a better way than most of the competition, right? So there aren't many big bike chains in the UK. There are a few, but not many, and there's certainly none that have the reach of Halfords. So by doing that in a single stroke, he'd opened up the market and got a route to market that was more prevalent than the traditional bike shops. And in fact, that's worked out really well for him, because earlier this year, Halfords bought him out, so now Halfords own the Boardman brand.
Yeah,
You know, so job done within a short few years. It's probably another 10-year overnight success, isn't it?
I think so. I think so. It's yeah. And that's the other thing as well, that we haven't touched upon, which is probably another show, is that it's really important that if you have an idea, you fail fast. Well, what do I mean by failing fast? Well, it's important to test your idea, move on, pivot, iterate, and come back to the central thread and develop your idea.
It's interesting, John, isn't it? Because that failure, or the use of the word failure, is highly emotive, and in fact, it could be a poor description for what we're talking about, because we're really learning. Actually, another Edison quote for you.
Yeah.
He hadn't failed a lot of times in his description. He just found hundreds of ways of that things didn't work. That wasn't a failure. That's actually part of your learning, and that's one of the reasons to prototype, iterate, measure, test, adapt. So, you know, he said a lot of other things as well about innovation, didn't he? Like it's 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration, which is.
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Actually, it's just thinking now about bicycles and about Broadman. You talked about first mover advantage and second mover advantage at the top of the show, and there's a certain person at the moment that's just had an arena with the Commonwealth Games named after him, Mr. Hoy.
Indeed.
Hoy has, sorry, that's wrong with me, Chris Hoy.
Sir Chris Hoy.
He's just launched his own bike or range of bikes. He's also used a similar channel, and he's done that through Evans Bikes, which I think, similar to Broadman Bikes, have got exclusivity in terms of distribution. What's curious about that model, though, is that Evans Bikes are the biggest online deliverer of bikes in the UK. So that's another interesting route to market that he's gone there.
Just while we're on about Chris Hoy and the Commonwealth Games, absolutely right that the velodrome's named after Chris Hoy. Did you know the security people had stopped him and name-checked him on his way in, asking who he was?
I did. I thought that was hilarious, and he retweeted that, I think.
He did, yeah.
But in fairness to Chris, he said, well, you know, the lady was just doing a job. She's there to check people in and check people out and check their ID. But I thought that was wonderful. I thought that was a reflection on the man. He seems very affable and genuine chap.
I wonder if she just stopped the Queen. I'm sorry, Mom, you can't come in. We need to name check you.
Yeah.
Is your name on the guest list? So I think the whole point is, you know, there are often ways of doing things that haven't been done before and haven't been thought about, and with the right sort of help, assistance, and creativity, it's open for any business to get out there and actually try some of those things out, improve what they're doing, improve their supply chain, and get their new product or service to market in a better way.
Yeah.
So you touched on business modeling, John, and we use some tools. So part of the whole lean startup methodology is about doing exactly this. It's about testing market, and it's the way that serial entrepreneurs find success so readily. And if any of you like Richard Branson and you follow what he does, then you can see that in spades. He doesn't have, he doesn't have a few hundred companies to his name in the Virgin Group by not by being afraid to go out there, talk to people, and test the ideas. He absolutely does that, and as I say, so do many of the really successful entrepreneurs out there. But that should be a lesson to all of us, and more than the business books and more than the how I did this, which tends to be very specific to a certain industry. I think the general philosophy of getting out, talking to people, finding people you can work with, finding new suppliers, new routes to market is the essential way to build any business.
I agree, because if you don't get out of the building and talk to your customers, be that customer discovery or customer validation, I would ask one key question, which is, how are you going to understand how your business or your product or service is going to create, deliver, and capture value? You're not. You're just going to have a blinkered focus, which to me is the wrong way to do something.
So having established that initial vision of what you want to achieve, I mean, we use some very visual tools, business model canvas, which if you look at business model generation, again, it'll be in the show notes or it'll be on our blog. Those are open source tools, actually distributed under the Creative Commons license. So you can print them out, stick them on your wall, and start to use them immediately. And the thing that they do that's better than a business plan is they give you an unassailable, unambiguous view of how your business is going to operate. Well worth a look. We use them extensively, so if you want to work with us, you get experience of them firsthand. And at that point, John, I think we've been on the Hangout long enough. We could probably talk for the rest of the morning about this.
Very true.
So I'd like to thank you for your appearance on the show. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for having me, Ian.
And I hope to welcome you back shortly. So,
great stuff. Thank you.
Yeah. So thanks a lot. It's been At the Sharp End. We've been talking about innovation in general and how to look for new business models, how to develop your products and service, and reference to a few companies out there. We're Khemeia Consulting. We help people innovate. We're an innovation agency. This has been At the Sharp End. We look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.